That seat is reserved for actual first-class passengers, not service staff." The words cut through the ambient noise of JFK's Terminal 4 like a knife, sharp and deliberate. Every syllable dripped with disdain aimed directly at the woman quietly working on her laptop. The air inside the terminal hung heavy with frustration. Hundreds of passengers for Flight 237 to London Heathrow had already endured 2 delay announcements. The departure board now showed 600 p.m. instead of the original 3:30 p.m., and tensions were rising with each passing minute. Gate B24 had become a pressure cooker of human emotions. Children wailed in overtired protests while their parents scrolled desperately through phones searching for alternative routes. Business travelers loosened ties and kicked off shoes, resignation settling into their features as conference calls were rescheduled from airport lounges. In the center of this chaos, in the cordoned-off first-class priority seating area, sat Amara Jackson. To casual observers, there was nothing remarkable about her. She wore well-fitted black jeans, pristine white sneakers, and a simple charcoal cashmere hoodie. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat professional bun. Her only visible accessory was a sleek watch on her left wrist, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak that the untrained eye might mistake for a simple timepiece rather than the $180,000 statement of subtle luxury it represented. Amara's focus remained on her ultra-thin laptop fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard as she made final adjustments to documents that would reshape an entire industry by this time tomorrow. She was so engrossed in her work that she barely registered the shadow falling across her screen until that voice, cold, entitled, imperious, demanded her attention. Standing over her was a woman in her early 50s, every inch of her screaming old money and rigid privilege. Her blonde hair was styled in an immaculate bob that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Designer sunglasses perched atop her head despite the indoor setting. Her cream Burberry trench coat hung open to reveal a St. John knit dress adorned with a Hermes scarf. One manicured hand clutched a Louis Vuitton roller bag, while the other gripped a matching tote. Behind this woman stood a man who seemed to physically embody discomfort, tall, thin, with thinning hair and a perpetual wince. His bespoke suit couldn't hide the apologetic slump of his shoulders as he hovered behind the woman like a reluctant shadow. The confrontation that was about to unfold would soon captivate millions online. Within hours, it would trend across every social platform. By morning, it would influence a billion-dollar business decision. But right now, it was simply one woman demanding a seat from another, unaware that she was about to challenge someone who owned not just a seat, but the entire sky. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in standing up to entitlement with dignity and power, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Now back to JFK, where one woman's mistake was about to become another woman's message. At 39 years old, Amara Jackson had already rewritten the rules of the tech industry without most people even knowing her name. As the founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations, she controlled a technology empire valued at over $40 billion that specialized in advanced AI systems and aerospace integration software. Growing up in Detroit's East Side, Amara was raised by parents who worked multiple jobs to support their family. Her mother, a hospital administrator by day and community college student by night, instilled in her the value of education as the one thing no one could take away. Her father, who worked at an auto plant for 30 years, taught her that true respect came from how you treated people, not what you owned. The simple cashmere hoodie she wore wasn't a fashion statement, but a personal philosophy. Authentic leadership doesn't need a uniform, she often told her executive team. While her competitors favored power suits and statement watches, Amara practiced what she privately called stealth wealth quality over labels, substance over show. Today's flight to London wasn't about comfort or convenience. Tomorrow morning at exactly 9 a.m., Greenwich Mean Time, she would sign the final papers acquiring Schroeder Dynamics, a European tech firm whose proprietary quantum computing technology would revolutionize Horizon's aerospace navigation systems. The $22 billion acquisition had been meticulously planned for 18 months, with teams working around the clock to clear regulatory hurdles across 3 continents. As Victoria's shadow fell over her laptop, Amara was reviewing the final contract amendments sent by her legal team just 20 minutes earlier. The documents on her screen represented thousands of work hours, hundreds of meetings, and the future employment of over 18,000 people globally. Amara took a deep breath as she looked up. This wasn't the first time she'd faced someone who saw her skin color before seeing her capabilities. Over the years, she'd developed what she called her 3-second reset, a brief moment where she allowed herself to feel the initial sting of prejudice before compartmentalizing it. 1. The recognition. 2. The release. 3. The response strategy. Amara had faced down hostile takeover attempts and government investigations without raising her voice. She'd negotiated with Chinese officials and Saudi princes without breaking her composure. She'd turned down acquisition offers from tech giants while being the only black woman in rooms filled with white male billionaires. This airport encounter was merely Tuesday. What Victoria Bennett couldn't possibly know was that Amara wasn't waiting for Flight 237. Flight 237 was in fact one of many commercial routes operated by Schroeder Dynamics, the luxury airline subsidiary that Horizon Innovations had acquired 3 years earlier as part of their aerospace expansion. And right now, on the private runway of JFK's Terminal 5, Amara's Gulfstream G700 was fueled and ready, its crew simply awaiting her arrival to depart for London. The irony wasn't lost on Amara being harassed in the first-class waiting area of an airline she technically owned. But years of experience had taught her that immediate revelation of power rarely yielded the best results. Strategic patience almost always revealed more and resolved better. So instead of immediately putting Victoria in her place, Amara measured her response, calibrating it to give the woman exactly enough rope to hang herself with. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Amara said, her voice calm and measured, barely audible above the terminal noise. That simple statement would prove to be the understatement of the year. Victoria Bennett had spent 52 years perfecting the art of getting exactly what she wanted. As the wife of Thomas Bennett, managing partner at Westridge Capital, she had cultivated an identity built entirely on proximity to wealth rather than personal achievement. The daughter of upper-middle-class parents from Connecticut, Victoria had attended Vassar College, where she studied art history without particular passion before dropping out in her junior year to marry Thomas, then a promising young financial analyst. While he built his career through 100-hour work weeks and ruthless networking, Victoria constructed her own empire of social connections and charitable board positions. Every aspect of her appearance was calculated for maximum status signaling. Her blonde bob required $800 maintenance visits every 3 weeks at Bergdorf Salon. Her wardrobe consisted exclusively of recognizable designer pieces carefully selected for their ability to be identified by fellow socialites. The Cartier bracelet, stacked with her Van Cleef and Arpels pieces, wasn't just jewelry, but a visual announcement of her husband's income bracket. What wasn't visible beneath the designer armor was the precarious financial reality of the Bennett situation. Thomas's firm had weathered several difficult quarters, and their Greenwich mansion carried a mortgage that required his annual bonus to service. The Bennett household operated on a razor-thin margin between spectacular wealth and spectacular debt, a balancing act that demanded Thomas land increasingly larger clients each year. This particular Tuesday had already been difficult for Victoria. That morning, she'd received a call informing her that her position on the Metropolitan Museum's Junior Benefit Committee was being restructured, a polite way of removing her after several complaints about her treatment of staff. The museum hadn't appreciated her suggestion that the catering team at the last gala looked too ethnic for the Renaissance-themed event. Thomas followed 2 steps behind his wife as she approached Amara, his body language a study in contained mortification. 25 years of marriage to Victoria had turned him into a professional apologizer, always ready with a generous tip or discreet phone call to smooth over his wife's indiscretions. He'd grown to accept his role as enabler, calculating that the social connections Victoria maintained were worth the occasional embarrassment. What he couldn't possibly know was how astronomical the cost would be this time. Victoria's confrontational approach toward Amara wasn't random. 3 days earlier, she'd been bumped from a first-class cabin due to an overbooking issue, an indignity she had spent hours raging about to anyone who would listen. Today's aggressive behavior was in her mind a necessary correction to the universe, a reassertion of her proper place in the hierarchy. "This area," Victoria said, gesturing dramatically toward the priority seating sign, "is for first-class passengers only." Her voice carried deliberately designed to attract attention and support from the surrounding travelers. "You need to collect your things and move to the general boarding area." The irony that would soon unfold was that Thomas's firm, Westridge Capital, had spent the past 3 months aggressively pursuing Horizon Innovations as a client. Next week's pitch for managing a $700 million portion of Horizon's investment portfolio represented the potential salvation of Westridge's difficult fiscal year. Thomas had personally overseen the preparation of the pitch deck, though he had never met Horizon's famously private CEO. Victoria's Louis Vuitton bags, purchased on the Bennett's overextended credit card during a stress shopping spree after the museum committee incident, now stood beside her like co-conspirators as she towered over Amara, waiting for compliance that would never come. "The cleaners will be through shortly," Victoria added when Amara didn't immediately respond, making an assumption that would soon destroy her husband's career and dismantle her carefully constructed social identity. In that moment, as Victoria Bennett looked down at Amara Jackson, she saw only what she expected to see: someone who didn't belong in her world. It would take less than 15 minutes for her to discover just how catastrophically wrong she was. "I am a first-class passenger," Amara replied evenly, turning her screen slightly away to protect the confidential acquisition details. She reached for her phone, displaying her digital boarding pass. "Seat 2A. Victoria's eyes narrowed, scanning the boarding pass with obvious skepticism. That could be anyone's reservation. These digital things are so easy to fake. She turned to her husband for support. "Thomas, don't you think it's suspicious?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with both women. "Victoria, there are plenty of other seats." "Let's just find another spot, and I don't want another spot," Victoria snapped, cutting him off. "I want this one. It's directly across from the charging station, and I need to charge my iPad." By now, several nearby passengers had begun to notice the interaction. A young Hispanic man behind the gate, counter his name tag identifying him as Diego Rodriguez, watched with growing concern. At 29, Diego had worked for the airline for 7 years and had developed a keen sense for potential situations. He recognized Amara immediately, having seen her photo in the airline's internal VIP passenger protocols document just last month. Diego began to pick up the desk phone, hesitated, then set it down. Company policy was clear about intervention timing, but something told him to wait and observe for another moment. Victoria's voice rose another decibel. "Look, I don't know how you got in here, but this area is reserved for premium passengers." Her emphasis on premium carried unmistakable subtext. "Your kind of ticket is probably for the back of the plane." "My kind of ticket," Amara repeated, her voice remaining level but taking on a slight edge. "You know exactly what I mean," Victoria replied, folding her arms across her designer outfit. "People who can actually afford first class don't usually show up dressed like that." She gestured dismissively at Amara's hoodie and jeans. Thomas stepped forward, finally finding his voice. "Victoria, that's enough. Let's just sit over there." He pointed to empty seats several feet away. "No, Thomas. I'm tired of people getting things they haven't earned. It's probably some affirmative action upgrade anyway. Victoria's voice carried clearly through the waiting area, causing several passengers to look up from their devices. Among them was Mia Hernandez, a 35-year-old marketing executive returning to London after a New York conference. Mia had already been recording the exchange discreetly on her phone for the past minute, her marketer's instinct recognizing the viral potential of what was unfolding. Amara closed her laptop, slowly sliding it into a sleek leather case beside her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her executive assistant Zoe Williams, who was tracking her location from their Manhattan office ETA for private terminal pilot filed flight plan for 5:15 p.m. Before Amara could respond, Victoria made her fatal error. "I said, move your things," Victoria demanded, reaching down toward Amara's leather laptop bag resting against the seat. "Please don't touch my property," Amara warned, her voice now carrying a clear note of authority. Victoria, interpreting this as defiance rather than the corporate command, grabbed the bag and tossed it aside. The bag skidded across the polished terminal floor, hitting a metal trash receptacle with a sickening crack. The sound of breaking technology cut through the ambient noise of the terminal like a gunshot. For 3 heartbeats, the entire gate area fell silent. Amara stood slowly, her expression unchanged, but her eyes now focused on Victoria with an intensity that made several onlookers step back involuntarily. Inside that bag was not only her laptop containing confidential acquisition documents, but also a custom-designed tablet with proprietary Horizon software that wasn't available on the consumer market. "You have no idea what you've just done," Amara said quietly. Victoria, mistaking Amara's controlled response for powerlessness, smiled triumphantly and settled into the newly vacated seat. "I know exactly what I've done. I've taken back what belongs to people who deserve it." Diego was now on the phone, speaking rapidly to someone while keeping his eyes on the situation. 2 security personnel had appeared at the edges of the gate area, alerted by the commotion. Thomas Bennett stood frozen, a dawning horror spreading across his features as he registered the quality of Amara's bag, the kind of understated luxury that only the truly wealthy recognized. The weight of his wife's actions was beginning to register, but he had no idea how devastating the consequences would truly be. Mia continued filming, now openly pointing her phone at the confrontation. She was joined by several other passengers, including Alexander Graham, a 45-year-old tech journalist for the Wall Street Journal, who had interviewed Amara Jackson twice for feature stories. His eyes widened with recognition, and he began typing rapidly on his phone. Amara remained standing, making no move toward her damaged property. Instead, she took out her phone and pressed a single contact. "Zoe," she said when the call connected, her voice perfectly steady. "We have a situation." What kind of situation? Zoe Williams's voice came clearly through Amara's phone. As Horizon's chief of staff for the past 7 years, Zoe had handled everything from acquisition crises to security threats against her boss. "The laptop with the Schroeder documents has been damaged," Amara said, maintaining eye contact with Victoria, who now sat smugly in the stolen seat. "And the Horizon tablet as well. I'll need replacements at the private terminal. Also run a check on a—" She paused, glancing at Thomas's visible ID badge. "Westridge Capital. Managing partner named Thomas Bennett." Victoria's self-satisfied expression didn't waver. From her perspective, she'd won claimed territory and established dominance. The fact that this woman in casual clothes was making mysterious phone calls meant nothing to her. Thomas, however, had gone completely still. The name Horizon had registered immediately. His firm had been pursuing Horizon Innovations for months as a potential client. His team had compiled exhaustive research on the company's holdings and investment strategies. But like many in the financial world, he had never seen a clear photo of the famously private CEO who avoided public appearances and social media. The few published pictures were often from a distance or partially obscured. Diego approached cautiously with James Porter, a 41-year-old airport security officer. "Is everything all right here?" Diego asked, addressing the question to the general area, rather than either woman specifically. Victoria immediately launched into her version of events. This woman was occupying the first-class seating area without a proper ticket. I've asked her to move to the appropriate waiting area, and she's being difficult. James turned to Amara, making a quick assessment based on appearances. His expression showed that he'd reached the same incorrect conclusion Victoria had. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Amara didn't immediately respond to James. Instead, she continued her phone conversation. "Zoe, please initiate Protocol Tango and alert Lawrence that we may need his team involved." She then turned to James, her demeanor shifting subtly. "Officer Porter," she said, reading his name badge. "I'm happy to verify my status, but first I'd like to file a report about destruction of property." James blinked, surprised she had addressed him by name. "Destruction of what property?" "My laptop and tablet," Amara said, pointing to the bag that had been thrown. "This woman grabbed my bag without permission and threw it across the terminal floor. The incident was recorded by several witnesses." She gestured toward Mia and others who were still filming. Victoria scoffed. It was just a misunderstanding. If she'd moved when asked, none of this would have happened. Mia stepped forward, her phone extended. "I have the whole thing on video." This woman she pointed to Amara was sitting quietly when she, pointing to Victoria, demanded her seat and then threw her property. Alexander Graham approached the group professional curiosity, overcoming his usual journalistic distance. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Amara directly. "Ms. Jackson, is there anything I can do to help with this situation?" The use of Amara's name sent a visible jolt through Diego and James. Victoria, however, remained oblivious to the significance, assuming Alexander had simply read a name from the boarding pass. "Thank you, Mr. Graham," Amara replied with a slight nod of recognition. "I appreciate your offer." Diego's phone rang at the gate counter. He answered it, listened for a moment, then looked at the group with wide eyes. He hurried back, leaning in to whisper something to James, whose posture immediately straightened. Mrs. Bennett James said, his tone notably more formal, as he addressed Victoria. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Victoria's triumphant expression faltered slightly. "What? Why should I move?" "She's the one who doesn't belong here." Thomas placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Victoria, please, let's just go. This isn't worth making a scene over." "I'm not making a scene, Thomas. I'm standing my ground. This is the first-class seating area, and we are first-class passengers." Victoria settled more firmly into the seat. James exchanged glances with Diego, who nodded slightly. "Mrs. Bennett, this isn't a request. Please gather your belongings and come with me." Victoria's face flushed with indignation. "Do you know who my husband is? Thomas, tell them who you are." Before Thomas could respond, a calm voice came over the gate announcement system. "Would Ms. Victoria Bennett please report to gate B24 for immediate assistance?" The atmosphere in the gate area shifted palpably. Passengers who had been pretending not to watch now openly stared. Victoria's confidence wavered as she registered that her name had been announced. Amara stood perfectly still, one hand still holding her phone, where Zoe remained on the line listening to everything. The corners of her mouth turned up in a barely perceptible smile, the kind that wasn't about amusement, but about the certainty of what would happen next. Victoria finally stood gathering her designer bags with jerky movements. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to file a complaint with the airline. Thomas, get the name of their supervisor." As Victoria and Thomas moved away from the seating area, Amara calmly walked over to retrieve her damaged laptop bag. She opened it, examining the cracked screen of her device, and then looked up to find Alexander Graham still standing nearby. "Wall Street Journal, right?" she asked him quietly. He nodded. "That was 2 years ago. The feature on aerospace innovation, and last year's piece on women in tech," she added. "Good work, by the way." "Jackson," he said, keeping his voice low. "This is going to be a story, isn't it?" Amara glanced toward Victoria and Thomas, now engaged in heated conversation with airport staff. "Mr. Graham, everything is a story. The question is, who gets to write the ending?" The transformation of the gate area continued as word spread in whispers and text messages. "That's Amara Jackson," one passenger murmured to another, the name rippling through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Amara stood beside her damaged belongings, seemingly unbothered by the commotion around her. She continued her phone conversation with Zoe, voice steady and measured. "Have Natalie meet me at the gate with replacement equipment. And tell Lawrence I want him on video conference in 20 minutes. Victoria and Thomas had been escorted to a small desk at the side of the gate area, where they were now confronted with a rapidly changing reality. The gate agent who addressed them wasn't Diego, but a more senior airline representative who had appeared as if from nowhere. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," the representative began, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention." Victoria, still operating under her previous assumptions, cut in. "Yes, we do. That woman," she pointed toward Amara, "is using the first-class seating area without authorization, and when I attempted to address the situation, she became confrontational." The airline representative's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm afraid you've made a significant error in judgment today." An airport announcement rang out overhead. "Attention passengers of Flight 237 to London Heathrow. We regret to inform you that this flight has been delayed indefinitely due to operational issues. Our team is working to resolve the situation as quickly as possible. We appreciate your patience and understanding." The general groan that swept through the terminal was interrupted by the arrival of Natalie Foster Horizon's 38-year-old head of security, accompanied by two airline executives in perfect suits. Natalie moved with the efficient precision of her former FBI training, carrying a sleek replacement laptop bag as she approached Amara. "Ms. Jackson," she said, handing over the equipment, "everything's been synchronized from your cloud backup. The Schroeder documents are loaded and ready for review." "Thank you, Natalie," Amara replied, accepting the bag. "Any word from their CEO, Mr. Schroeder, is standing by for your call. He's been briefed on the delay." Victoria watched this exchange with growing confusion, her certainty beginning to crack. Thomas, however, had gone completely pale as recognition dawned. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, typing frantically to search for images of Horizon's CEO. Diego approached Amara with a deeply apologetic expression. "Ms. Jackson, on behalf of the entire airline, I want to express our profound apologies for this incident. We're implementing your travel contingency plan immediately." Alexander Graham had retreated to a respectful distance but continued observing the scene with professional interest. He wasn't the only one documenting the moment. At least a dozen passengers had their phones out recording what was unfolding. Mia Hernandez approached Diego. "Excuse me, but can someone explain what's happening? Some of us have connecting flights in London." Diego hesitated, glancing toward the airline executives for guidance. One of them nodded slightly, and Diego turned back to address not just Mia, but all the nearby passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying across the gate area. "Due to an unfortunate incident, Flight 237 has been temporarily delayed. We're working to resume operations as quickly as possible." From the desk where Victoria and Thomas were still being held, Thomas's voice suddenly rose in horror. "Oh my God, Victoria, do you have any idea what you've done?" Victoria turned to her husband, irritation giving way to the first flicker of unease. "What are you talking about?" "Thomas." Thomas held up his phone, displaying a corporate profile of Amara Jackson, founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations. "That woman you just assaulted, she's the CEO of Horizon, the client we've been pursuing for months, the one that could save the firm." The blood drained from Victoria's face as the implications began to register. Her gaze shot back to Amara, now surrounded by an efficient team of professionals, all deferring to her authority. The airline executive who had been conferring with Diego now approached Victoria and Thomas. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'm Jason Miller, Regional Director of Customer Experience. I need to inform you that your travel privileges with our airline have been suspended pending review. Suspended, Victoria sputtered. You can't do that. We're premium members. We can and we have, Jason replied calmly. Additionally, we've been instructed to cooperate fully with any legal action Ms. Jackson chooses to pursue regarding the destruction of her property. Thomas gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles white. There must be something we can do to resolve this situation. Please, this is clearly a misunderstanding. At that moment, one of the large terminal screens that normally displayed departure information switched to a breaking news feed. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Horizon Innovations set to acquire Schroeder Dynamics in $22 billion deal. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic if it had been orchestrated. All eyes in the terminal moved between the screen and Amara, who simply nodded to Natalie as she received the news alert on her phone simultaneously. Looks like the press embargo lifted early, Amara commented. Zoe, make sure our team in London is prepared for the media presence when we land. Victoria's face had transformed completely. The smug superiority had vanished, replaced by dawning horror as she began to comprehend exactly who she had confronted and what it might cost her. Attention, all passengers in Terminal 4, came the next announcement. We apologize for the ongoing delay of Flight 237 to London Heathrow. Our team is working to resume normal operations as quickly as possible. Thank you for your continued patience. The gate area had become a theater with Amara at center stage, though she hadn't moved or raised her voice once. The crowd of onlookers had grown, many openly filming with their phones. Social media was already lighting up with early clips of the confrontation hashtags forming organically. First class, showdown, CEO in hoodie, airport, Karen. Victoria stood frozen beside Thomas, her designer outfit suddenly seeming like costume jewelry, flashy but fundamentally worthless in the face of real power. Thomas continued scrolling through his phone, each new piece of information about Amara Jackson and Horizon Innovations, driving the stake deeper into his professional future. $40 billion, he whispered, reading Horizon's current market valuation. She controls $40 billion in assets. Victoria didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on Amara, who was now speaking quietly with Natalie Foster and an expanding circle of airline executives. Diego Rodriguez approached the Bennetts, his demeanor professional but cool. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I've been instructed to escort you to a private area where we can discuss the next steps regarding your travel arrangements. This is ridiculous. Victoria finally managed her voice, having lost its earlier authority. It was just a misunderstanding about a seat. Mrs. Bennett Diego replied evenly, You physically assaulted a passenger and damaged valuable property. That goes far beyond a seating misunderstanding. Thomas placed his hand on Victoria's arm. Victoria, please let's just go with him. As Diego began leading them away, Amara's voice carried clearly across the gate area. Mr. Rodriguez, one moment. Everyone turned. Amara walked toward them with measured steps, the replacement laptop bag slung over her shoulder. The terminal fell almost completely silent. Mrs. Bennett. Amara set her voice level but carrying easily in the hushed space. Before you go, I think we should finish our conversation. Victoria swallowed visibly. Her earlier confidence evaporated. I apologize for the misunderstanding. If I'd known who you were, Amara raised a hand, stopping Victoria mid-sentence. That's precisely the problem, isn't it? You believed your behavior was acceptable because you thought I was nobody important. She let the words hang in the air for a moment. But here's what you need to understand. Even if I hadn't been who I am, your actions would still have been unacceptable. The gathered crowd was completely silent now, witnessing what felt like a public reckoning. You assumed, Amara continued, based on my appearance that I didn't belong in first class. You chose to enforce that assumption by physically assaulting me and damaging my property. Victoria flinched at the word assault. her eyes darting around at the many phones recording the interaction. "What you couldn't possibly have known," Amara went on, "is that the laptop you damaged contained confidential documents related to a $22 billion acquisition that's been in progress for 18 months. Documents that fortunately were backed up, but whose compromise could have constituted a serious securities violation." Thomas looked as though he might be sick. The implications for his financial firm were becoming clearer by the second. "I'm so sorry," Victoria said, her voice small. "If there's anything we can do to make this right." "Actually, there is," Amara replied. She turned to Thomas. "Mr. Bennett, you're with Westridge Capital, correct?" Thomas nodded stiffly, unable to form words. "Your firm has a pitch scheduled with my team next week regarding management of a portion of Horizon's investment portfolio. Is that accurate?" "Yes," Thomas managed to say. "We've been preparing for months." Amara nodded. "I thought so. I recognized the name." She paused. "You should know that I make a point of working only with people who demonstrate respect, integrity, and sound judgment in business and in life." The implications couldn't have been clearer. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, the full weight of his wife's actions crashing down on him. At that moment, Natalie approached with a tablet displaying a live video feed. "Ms. Jackson, I have Lawrence Hamilton on the line for you." Amara took the tablet, addressing the man on the screen. "Lawrence, perfect timing. Would you please confirm something for me?" She turned the tablet so that Lawrence Horizon's 52-year-old general counsel could see Thomas. "Is this Thomas Bennett of Westridge Capital?" she asked. Lawrence's voice came clearly through the tablet speakers. "Yes, that's him. Westridge is scheduled to pitch for our portfolio management next Tuesday. They're seeking to handle approximately $700 million of our liquid assets." "Thank you, Lawrence," Amara said, turning the tablet back toward herself. "Please clear my calendar for 10 minutes. I need to resolve a situation here before we depart." "Of course," Lawrence replied. "The Schroeder team is standing by whenever you're ready." Amara handed the tablet back to Natalie, then faced Victoria and Thomas again. "Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Bennett, I believe we're at a decision point." Victoria had shrunk into herself, the designer outfit that had seemed so important, now just expensive fabric draped over a woman who had made a catastrophic error in judgment. "What happens now?" Thomas asked, his voice barely audible. Amara looked at them both for a long moment. "That depends on what you believe the appropriate consequences should be for your actions today." Before either could respond, Jason Miller stepped forward. "Ms. Jackson, your private transportation is ready whenever you'd like to proceed to the terminal." Amara nodded, then turned back to the Bennetts. "I need to leave for London now. A $22 billion acquisition waits for no one, not even airport confrontations." She addressed the gathered crowd. "To the passengers of Flight 237, I apologize for the delay. The airline will be providing full compensation and the flight will resume shortly." Then to Diego. "Mr. Rodriguez, please ensure everyone receives appropriate accommodations and credits." Diego nodded quickly. "Yes, Ms. Jackson, it's already being arranged." With that, Amara turned and began walking toward the exit, Natalie and the airline executives falling in step beside her. The crowd parted automatically, phones still recording her departure. As she reached the exit, she paused and looked back at Victoria and Thomas. "One more thing. You asked earlier about first class." A small, composed smile appeared on her face. "I'm not flying first class today. I'm flying private. My jet is waiting." And with that, she was gone, leaving Victoria and Thomas Bennett to face the consequences of a confrontation that was already spreading across the internet at the speed of outrage. "You're right about one thing," Amara said, turning to face Victoria one last time. "There has been a misunderstanding." Her voice remained measured, professional, but carried an unmistakable current of authority that commanded the attention of everyone in the gate area. Victoria stood rigid, her designer outfit suddenly seeming like armor that provided no actual protection. Thomas stepped forward, desperation evident in his movements. "Ms. Jackson, please," he began, extending his hand. "Thomas Bennett, managing partner at Westridge Capital. There's clearly been a terrible mistake here, and I want to personally apologize for any inconvenience." Amara regarded his outstretched hand for a moment before meeting his gaze. "Westridge Capital," she repeated. "You're pitching for our portfolio management next week, correct?" Thomas nodded eagerly, relief flooding his features at this potential lifeline. "Yes, exactly. We've been preparing extensively for the opportunity to work with Horizon Innovations. Our team has developed a comprehensive strategy for your European assets, particularly in light of your expansion." "I see," Amara said simply. Lawrence Hamilton, who had been observing via tablet, spoke up. "Ms. Jackson, if I may, Westridge Capital is indeed scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Their proposal involves management of approximately $700 million in liquid assets primarily focused on our European holdings." Victoria's eyes widened as the financial figures registered, finally understanding the magnitude of what her actions had jeopardized. "Thank you, Lawrence," Amara replied. She turned her attention back to Thomas. "Mr. Bennett, I make it a policy never to make important business decisions in the heat of the moment. That said, I also believe that how people behave when they think no one important is watching reveals their true character." Thomas swallowed visibly. "Our company values are clearly stated on our website," Amara continued. "Respect, integrity, and excellence. I expect those same values from anyone who handles our investments." Diego approached cautiously. "Ms. Jackson, your security team has arrived to escort you to the private terminal." Amara nodded her acknowledgement but kept her focus on the Bennetts. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I have a $22 billion acquisition to complete. I don't have time to address this situation fully right now. My legal team will be in touch regarding the damaged equipment and the physical assault." Victoria flinched at the word assault, suddenly aware of the legal ramifications of her actions. "As for Westridge Capital's proposal," Amara continued, "I'll leave that decision to our investment committee, though I should note that I do sit on that committee." Thomas's momentary hope crumbled visibly. Mia Hernandez stepped forward, phone still recording. "Ms. Jackson, I have the full video of the incident if you or your team needs it." "Thank you," Amara replied with a genuine smile. "That's very kind." "My security chief will get your contact information." Natalie moved immediately to exchange information with Mia, her efficiency seamless and professional. The airline executives who had been hovering nearby now approached Victoria and Thomas. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, we need to discuss your current travel status. If you'll follow me, please." Victoria, still stunned, allowed herself to be led away. Thomas followed, his shoulders slumped in defeat, casting one last desperate glance toward Amara. Alexander Graham, who had been documenting the entire exchange, approached Amara as she prepared to leave. "Ms. Jackson." Alexander Graham from the Wall Street Journal. "Would you care to comment on this incident, or how it might affect Horizon's acquisition of Schroeder Dynamics?" Amara considered the journalist for a moment. "Mr. Graham, what happened here today was unfortunate but ultimately a footnote. The real story is about a technology integration that will transform aerospace navigation and safety for decades to come." And the confrontation Alexander pressed is a reminder that assumptions are expensive, Amara replied. "Some people just paid a very high price for theirs." She glanced toward where Victoria and Thomas were being escorted away. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a plane to catch." With that, Amara departed the gate area flanked by Natalie Foster and her security team. Behind her, Flight 237's passengers watched in awe as the woman in the simple hoodie and jeans, the woman who had been deemed unworthy of a first-class seat, exited to board her private jet. Diego returned to the gate counter, picking up the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. Flight 237 to London Heathrow will resume boarding in approximately 30 minutes. As compensation for your patience, all passengers will receive a $500 travel voucher and complimentary premium meal service regardless of cabin class. A cheer went up from the waiting passengers, the delay suddenly more bearable now that it came with compensation and an unexpected show of justice being served. Meanwhile, Victoria and Thomas Bennett were escorted to a small office where the full consequences of their actions were beginning to unfold, consequences that would reach far beyond a simple airport confrontation. 20 minutes later, Amara settled into the custom leather seat of her Gulfstream G700. The private terminal at JFK operated with a different rhythm than the commercial concourses, quieter, more efficient, designed for people whose time was literally valued in thousands of dollars per minute. All systems restored and secure, Zoe reported, handing Amara a new tablet. The damaged devices have been completely wiped remotely and will be collected by our security team. The cabin of the Horizon corporate jet was a study in understated luxury. Unlike the flashy private planes favored by entertainers and social media influencers, this aircraft was designed for productive work and comfortable transit. The 12-seat configuration had been customized with advanced communications technology, allowing Amara's team to function as effectively in the air as they did on the ground. Natalie Foster took the seat opposite Amara. Initial social media analysis shows the incident is trending. Video clips are already circulating on multiple platforms. Anticipated reach. Amara asked, powering up the tablet. Conservative estimate of 5 million views by the time we land in London, Natalie replied. The hashtags are gaining traction. Had First Class CEO, Horizon Justice, Snatched Airport Karen. Amara nodded, unsurprised. Have our communications team monitor but not engage. This isn't about viral fame. It's about a fundamental lack of respect that happens every day to people who don't have private jets to escape to. The remaining team members boarded efficiently Lawrence Hamilton via secure video link from New York and 3 key executives who would participate in tomorrow's acquisition signing. The jet's door closed with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them into their pressurized environment of privilege and productivity. Ms. Jackson, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. We're cleared for immediate takeoff. Flight time to London Heathrow is approximately 6 hours and 20 minutes. We should arrive at 5:40 a.m. local time. Thank you, Captain Rivera, Amara replied. Please proceed. As the jet taxied toward the runway, Zoe handed Amara a secure phone. Schroeder's CEO is on the line. He's concerned about the delay and the videos circulating online. Amara accepted the phone. Hans, good evening. Yes, we had a minor situation at the airport. No, the acquisition is proceeding exactly as planned. The documents are secure and our team is en route. Yes, I'll see you at 9 a.m. sharp. She ended the call and gazed out the window. Below them, Terminal 4 was visible, the same building where Victoria Bennett had made assumptions that would ultimately destroy her social standing and her husband's career. The irony wasn't lost on Amara how a woman who had defined herself by proximity to wealth had failed to recognize true power when it sat quietly in front of her. Lawrence, Amara said, turning to the video screen where her general counsel waited. What's the status on Westridge Capital? Lawrence consulted his notes. Their pitch was scheduled for Tuesday. The deck was submitted yesterday for preliminary review. Based on initial analysis, it's actually quite solid. They've done their homework on our European strategy. And now? Amara asked. Now, Lawrence replied, I recommend we cancel the pitch and remove them from consideration. The behavior exhibited today raises serious concerns about judgment and corporate culture. Amara considered this as the jet accelerated down the runway. Draft a formal communication to their board. Cite specific concerns about conduct unbecoming of a financial partner. Don't mention my name or today's incident specifically, they'll make the connection. Of course. Lawrence nodded. And regarding the damaged equipment, file an insurance claim for replacement value, Amara decided. But hold off on any personal legal action against the Bennetts. Let's see how they respond first. The Gulf Stream lifted smoothly into the evening sky, banking gently as it turned east toward the Atlantic. Below the lights of New York City spread out like a circuit board millions of interconnected lives continuing their ordinary patterns, while extraordinary decisions were made above them. Natalie's tablet chimed with an alert. The video has been picked up by major news outlets. CNBC is running a segment on the incident connecting it to the Schroeder acquisition announcement. Amara accepted the tablet, watching the muted footage of herself standing calmly while Victoria Bennett gesticulated wildly. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, one woman exhibiting power through restraint, the other desperately flaunting status symbols that ultimately meant nothing. Zoe Amara said, handing back the tablet. "Draft a statement for our communications team. Something simple and dignified. Acknowledge the incident without details. Refocus attention on the Schroeder acquisition and what it means for aerospace safety technologies." "Already prepared," Zoe replied, displaying a draft on her screen. "We've emphasized the technical achievements rather than the confrontation." Amara scanned the text and nodded her approval. "Perfect. Release it now." As the jet reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off. The cabin attendant approached respectfully. "Ms. Jackson, would you like your usual tea now?" "Yes, thank you, Elise." Alone for a moment as her team dispersed to their respective tasks, Amara finally allowed herself a deep breath. The incident at the airport wasn't the first time she'd faced discrimination, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. The difference was that now her response could set an example that might prevent someone else from experiencing the same treatment. She opened her tablet to review the final acquisition documents, pushing the airport confrontation to the back of her mind. There would be time to process that later. Right now, $22 billion, and the future of aerospace navigation technology required her full attention. The jet cruised at 45,000 feet far above the commercial airways, a perfect metaphor for Amara's position relative to Victoria Bennett's misguided sense of superiority. "I don't understand why we're being treated like criminals," Victoria hissed, pacing the small airport administrative office where they'd been escorted. "This is completely ridiculous." Thomas sat hunched in a molded plastic chair, his expensive suit suddenly seeming to hang on his frame. He hadn't spoken since they'd been led away from the gate area. His attention remained fixed on his phone, where notifications continued to arrive with horrifying frequency. "Thomas, are you even listening to me?" Victoria demanded. "Call our lawyer. This woman is clearly overreacting to make some kind of political statement." Finally, Thomas looked up. The expression on his face stopped Victoria mid-sentence. "Do you have any idea," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what you've done? What I've done?" Victoria replied indignantly. "I was simply—" "You've destroyed everything." Thomas interrupted, each word deliberate and heavy. "Everything I've worked for. Everything we have." Victoria scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic. So what if some tech CEO got her feelings hurt? We'll send flowers, make a donation to whatever cause she supports, and this will all blow over." Thomas held up his phone, displaying a real-time Twitter search for #AirportKaren. The video clips were multiplying exponentially, each one showing Victoria from multiple angles as she confronted Amara and threw her property. "This isn't going to blow over Victoria. This is going viral, and it's going to burn our lives to the ground." The office door opened, and Jason Miller entered with two other airline representatives. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, we need to discuss your immediate travel status and the incident that occurred." Victoria straightened, attempting to reassert her social authority. "Yes, we absolutely do. The way we've been treated is completely unacceptable. I want to speak to your superior immediately." Jason's expression remained professionally neutral. "Mrs. Bennett, our airline has a zero-tolerance policy for physical assault and destruction of property. The incident was captured on multiple cameras and witnessed by dozens of passengers. It wasn't assault, Victoria insisted. It was a misunderstanding about seating assignments. You physically grabbed another passenger's property and threw it across the terminal, Jason replied evenly. That constitutes assault under both airline policy and New York state law. Thomas stood suddenly. What are our options here? Jason turned to him. Mr. Bennett, you and Mrs. Bennett are being removed from Flight 237. Your return tickets have been canceled and you're being placed on our no-fly list pending a full investigation. No-fly list, Victoria repeated incredulously. You can't be serious. Additionally, Jason continued, Ms. Jackson's company has indicated they may pursue civil charges for the damaged equipment which we understand contained confidential business documents. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. How much? The equipment itself is valued at approximately $15,000, but the potential business impact is being assessed separately. Victoria laughed in disbelief. $15,000 for a laptop. That's absurd. The devices were custom designed with proprietary technology, Jason explained. They're not consumer products. Thomas's phone rang the screen displaying Westridge Chairman. He stared at it for a moment before answering. Charles. Yes, He stopped listening, his face growing paler by the second. I understand. Yes, I saw the announcement about the acquisition. No, I wasn't aware of the connection until... Yes, Charles. I'll come directly to the office. He ended the call, his hand trembling slightly. I've been recalled to the office immediately. The chairman saw the video. Victoria's composure finally began to crack as the reality of their situation sank in. Outside the office window, regular airport operations continued. Passengers for other flights moved through the terminal unaware of the life-altering drama unfolding in this small room. Thomas's phone chimed again with an email notification. He opened it, scanned the contents, and let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. What is it? Victoria asked, genuine fear creeping into her voice for the first time. It's from the investment committee at Horizon Innovations, Thomas replied flatly. They're canceling our pitch meeting and removing Westridge from consideration for their portfolio management. Because of a seating misunderstanding, Victoria said, incredulity returning to her voice. That's completely unprofessional. They can't do that. They can do whatever they want, Victoria. They're a $40 billion company and they just watched the wife of our managing partner assault their CEO. Thomas's voice rose for the first time. Do you understand what this means? The Horizon account was worth potentially $700 million in assets under management. My year-end bonus, the one that pays our mortgage, was contingent on landing that account. Victoria sank into a chair, her designer bags puddled forgotten at her feet. This is insane. All of this because of a misunderstanding about who belongs in first class. No, Thomas said, standing to collect his belongings. All of this because you couldn't fathom that a black woman in casual clothes might be more powerful than you. Jason cleared his throat. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, we need a decision on how you plan to exit the airport. We can arrange ground transportation for you, or you can make your own arrangements. But you will not be flying with us today or in the foreseeable future. Thomas nodded wearily. I'll call a car service. Outside the administrative office, regular travelers continued their journeys, unaware that just a few feet away, the carefully constructed world of Victoria and Thomas Bennett was collapsing, a private catastrophe spawned by public prejudice. As they gathered their belongings to leave, Thomas's phone chimed one final time. The notification preview showed a news alert from CNBC Horizon CEO Amara Jackson. Boards private jet for London after airport altercation. 22 Schroeder acquisition proceeding as planned. Victoria caught a glimpse of the headline and finally fell silent, the full magnitude of her misjudgment becoming impossible to deny. Dawn broke over London as Amara's Gulfstream touched down at Heathrow's private aviation terminal. The sky was painted in watercolor shades of pink and gold, a striking backdrop for the sleek aircraft as it taxied toward the waiting ground crew. Inside the cabin, Amara had already been awake for an hour reviewing the final acquisition documents and preparing for the day ahead. The transatlantic flight had given her team time to refine their strategy and adjust to the unexpected publicity surrounding their arrival. Social media update. Natalie reported sliding into the seat across from Amara as they prepared for landing. The incident has gone fully viral. Over 12 million views across platforms and mainstream media has picked it up globally. BBC, CNN, Bloomberg, they're all running segments connecting the airport confrontation with the Schroeder acquisition. Amara nodded, her expression neutral. And Westridge Capital. Their stock opened down 4% in pre-market trading. Zoe interjected, checking her tablet. Financial analysts are speculating about the lost Horizon management opportunity. The jet came to a stop and the cabin door opened to reveal a small contingent of executives waiting on the tarmac. Among them stood Hans Schroeder, the 60-year-old founder of Schroeder Dynamics, his silver hair catching the early morning light. "Ready for this?" Zoe asked, handing Amara a fresh portfolio containing the final documents. "Always," Amara replied simply. As she descended the aircraft stairs, Amara was immediately aware of the increased media presence. Beyond the standard business press that would cover a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, additional camera crews had gathered at the perimeter of the private terminal, a clear indication that the airport incident had amplified interest in her arrival. Hans Schroeder stepped forward to greet her with a firm handshake. "Ms. Jackson, welcome to London. I trust your journey was eventful." His German accent lent a certain gravity to the subtle reference. "The important part is that we're here now, Mr. Schroeder," Amara replied with a small smile. "And ready to make history." The assembled executives moved efficiently toward the waiting cars, a convoy of sleek black Mercedes sedans with tinted windows. Inside the lead vehicle, Hans settled beside Amara as they pulled away from the terminal. "I must admit," he said once they were underway, "when I saw the videos this morning, I was concerned there might be complications with our timeline." Mr. Schroeder, Amara replied, "In the 18 months we've been working toward this acquisition, we've navigated regulatory hurdles across 3 continents, restructured financing during a global downturn, and aligned technical teams speaking 4 different languages. A brief airport confrontation wasn't going to derail us at the finish line." Hans nodded appreciatively. "That response tells me everything I need to know about why Horizon has been so successful under your leadership." The convoy wound its way through London's early morning traffic toward the gleaming glass tower in Canary Wharf, where the signing ceremony would take place. Inside, teams of lawyers, financial advisors, and technical experts from both companies had been working through the night to prepare the final documentation. As they entered the building, Amara was struck by how distant the airport incident already felt. Here, surrounded by the machinery of global finance and technology, Victoria Bennett's petty display of prejudice seemed small and irrelevant. Yet Amara knew that for many people without her resources and position, such encounters represented daily obstacles with real consequences. The signing ceremony proceeded with the choreographed precision of a high-stakes business ritual. Photographs were taken, hands were shaken, and by 9:17 a.m. London time, Horizon Innovations had officially acquired Schroeder Dynamics for $22 billion, the largest aerospace technology merger of the year. In the press conference that followed, journalists inevitably raised questions about the airport incident. Amara addressed them directly but briefly. "While yesterday's unfortunate encounter has received significant attention today, is about the transformative potential of bringing together 2 innovative companies. This acquisition will enhance aviation safety, reduce carbon emissions through more efficient routing algorithms, and create thousands of jobs across Europe and North America." When pressed specifically about Victoria Bennett, Amara simply said, I believe that how we respond to disrespect says more about us than the disrespect itself. Today, we're responding by moving forward with creating technology that matters. By early afternoon, the business aspects of the trip had been successfully concluded. Amara found herself with a rare moment of solitude in her hotel suite overlooking the Thames. She picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mom." "It's me." "Yes, I saw the news coverage." "No, I'm fine, really." She smiled at her mother's protective concern. "It was just another Tuesday for us, wasn't it?" "I know, but this time there were cameras. The acquisition went perfectly. $22 billion just like we planned." "Yes, I'm being careful. Love you too. I'll call tomorrow." As she ended the call, Amara thought about how her parents had prepared her for a world that would often judge her by her appearance rather than her achievements. Their lessons in dignity and strategic patience had served her well from the community college classrooms of Detroit to the corporate boardrooms of global finance. Outside her window, London continued its eternal rhythm, unaware that a quiet revolution in aerospace technology had just been formalized in its financial district, or that the woman who made it happen had been deemed unworthy of a first-class seat just 24 hours earlier. The granite countertops of the Bennett's Greenwich kitchen, once the proud showcase of Victoria's social ascension, now served as an impromptu desk where Thomas sorted through stacks of financial documents. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and a half-empty tumbler of scotch sat by his elbow despite the early afternoon hour. "Thomas, you need to do something." Victoria insisted, pacing the kitchen in yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, her at-home uniform that still cost more than most people's formal wear. "Call Charles again. Make him understand this isn't fair." Thomas looked up, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Fair? You want to talk about fair, Victoria?" He pushed a document across the counter toward her. "This is my termination letter. Conduct unbecoming a managing partner. 22 years at Westridge ended because you couldn't tolerate sitting next to someone you deemed beneath you." Victoria flinched, but quickly recovered. "That's ridiculous. You weren't even involved. I was the one who spoke to that woman, not you." "That woman?" Thomas replied, his voice dangerously quiet as Amara Jackson. "She built a $40 billion company from nothing. She employs over 15,000 people, and she just completed one of the largest tech acquisitions of the year. Meanwhile, you've accomplished what exactly? Redecorating this house with money we don't actually have." Victoria's phone chimed with a notification. She glanced at it, then quickly set it face down on the counter, but not before Thomas caught a glimpse of the screen, another social media tag, another comment from a former friend distancing themselves from Hat Airport Karen. "How bad is it?" Thomas asked, gesturing toward her phone. Victoria's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. "They've uninvited me from the hospital benefit committee. Marissa says they're concerned about negative publicity affecting fundraising efforts." Her voice broke slightly. 20 years on that committee, Thomas. I was supposed to chair it next year." Thomas laughed a hollow sound, devoid of humor. "The hospital benefit is the least of our concerns right now." He picked up another document. "The bank called about the mortgage. Without my bonus, we can't make the payments. We're underwater by almost $2 million. "So what does that mean?" Victoria asked, genuine fear creeping into her voice. "It means we need to sell, immediately, probably at a loss." Victoria sank onto one of the kitchen stools, her hand unconsciously reaching for her strand of pearls, a nervous habit from her Connecticut childhood. This can't be happening. Not because of one stupid incident at an airport. Thomas's phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered it on speaker. "Yes." "Charles." The voice of Westridge Capital's chairman filled the kitchen. "Thomas, I'm calling to inform you that our legal team has completed its review. The board has decided not to contest your termination. Additionally, we'll be issuing a public statement distancing the firm from the incident involving Ms. Jackson. I understand, Thomas replied flatly. Furthermore, Charles continued, we've been informed that Horizon Innovations has declined to pursue legal action regarding the damaged equipment provided. There are no further incidents or public statements from you or your wife about Ms. Jackson or the company. That's unexpectedly generous, Thomas admitted. It is, Charles agreed, which is more than I can say for the 7 clients who have withdrawn their accounts from Westridge since the video went viral. The losses currently stand at $1.2 billion in assets under management, with several more clients reviewing their relationship with us. Victoria's face went ashen. I'm sorry, Charles Thomas said quietly. So am I, Thomas. Your career was exemplary until this week. I suggest you both maintain a low profile until this blows over if it ever does. Goodbye. The call ended, leaving the kitchen in silence, save for the expensive refrigerator's gentle hum. Victoria stood and walked to the window overlooking their manicured backyard, the professional landscaping, the heated pool, the guest house they'd added just last year. All of it leveraged on credit, all of it dependent on Thomas's position and bonus structure. What do we do now? She asked, her voice small. Thomas gathered the papers into a neat stack. We start over. I'll call a real estate agent today. We'll list the house, sell what we can, and downsize dramatically. He looked up at his wife. And you'll need to find a job. A job, Victoria repeated as if he'd suggested she grow wings. I haven't worked since before we were married. What would I even do? I don't know, Victoria. But you have a partial art history degree from Vassar. Maybe start there. Victoria turned back to the window, tears finally breaking through her carefully constructed composure. Outside, a delivery truck stopped at their neighbor's house unloading packages. More acquisitions, more status symbols, more evidence of the life Victoria had defined herself by, and was now watching slip away. Thomas's phone chimed with a news alert. He opened it to find yet another story about Amara Jackson, this one praising the success of the Schroeder acquisition and highlighting Horizon's announcement of a new research center in London that would create 500 high-paying jobs. The contrast couldn't have been more stark, one woman's career soaring to new heights, while their own lives crumbled around them all because of a moment of prejudice in an airport terminal. Victoria's social calendar, once filled with charity luncheons and committee meetings, now showed a week of blank spaces and canceled invitations. The Greenwich social circle that had been her entire identity was rapidly closing ranks, protecting itself from association with her viral infamy. Thomas closed his laptop and stood up. I have a meeting with a headhunter at 4. Don't wait up. He paused at the kitchen doorway. And Victoria, maybe use this time to think about why you felt so threatened by a woman in a hoodie that you needed to throw her property across an airport. Left alone in the kitchen that had been featured in 2 home design magazines. Victoria Bennett, once the arbiter of Greenwich social inclusion, faced the consequences of her assumptions in solitary, excruciating detail. 3 months after the airport incident, Amara stood on a stage in Horizon's New York headquarters facing an audience of airline executives, technology journalists, and industry regulators. Behind her, a large screen displayed the words, "Introducing the Jackson Protocol" over Horizon's distinctive logo. When I founded Horizon Innovations 15 years ago, Amara began, her voice calm and measured. Our mission was to create technology that improved lives. Today we're extending that mission into an area that affects millions of travelers every day. The airline customer experience. The audience listened attentively, many aware of the incident that had inspired this new initiative, but professional enough not to reference it directly. The Jackson Protocol is a comprehensive training and accountability program designed to address unconscious bias in customer service environments. Amara continued, Developed in partnership with leading behavioral scientists and diversity experts, this program uses advanced data analysis to identify patterns of discriminatory treatment before they become entrenched cultural problems. On the screen behind her, the presentation shifted to show the protocol's key components, standardized training modules, real-time feedback systems, and anonymous reporting tools for both employees and customers. In the front row, Diego Rodriguez, now promoted to Customer Experience Training Director for his airline, nodded in approval. Beside him sat Mia Hernandez, whose viral video had catalyzed the conversation around bias in travel industries. This isn't about punishing individual employees, Amara emphasized. It's about creating better structures, ones that automatically promote respect and dignity for all travelers, regardless of appearance, accent, or ability. When these structures are in place, everyone benefits. Passengers have better experiences. Airlines face fewer complaints, and employees work in a more positive environment. What Amara didn't mention explicitly was how the Jackson protocol had already been adopted by 7 major airlines in the 3 months since its development. Her team had worked around the clock to transform a personal humiliation into an industry-wide opportunity for improvement. Today, I'm proud to announce that Horizon will be funding implementation of this protocol across our partner airlines at no cost to them for the first year, Amara continued. Additionally, we're launching a mobile application that allows travelers to document and report discriminatory incidents in real time, creating accountability through transparency. The screen displayed the sleek interface of the new application named FairFlight, which allowed users to record incidents, track resolution status, and access aggregate data about airline performance on equity metrics. But technology alone isn't enough, Amara acknowledged. Which is why we've also established the Horizon Equity Initiative, a $50 million commitment to supporting education and training programs for underrepresented groups in aviation and technology. The announcement drew appreciative applause from the audience. In the back of the room, Alexander Graham from the Wall Street Journal made notes for the feature he was preparing on how a single incident of discrimination had sparked an industry-wide transformation. After the presentation, as attendees networked over coffee, Diego approached Amara with evident admiration. "Ms. Jackson, I want to thank you for turning what happened that day into something positive. When I saw Mrs. Bennett confront you, I hesitated too long before intervening. The protocol would have given me clear guidelines for addressing the situation immediately." "That's exactly the point, Mr. Rodriguez," Amara replied with a warm smile. "The responsibility shouldn't fall solely on individual employees to make difficult judgment calls in the moment. Proper structures and training create clear pathways for appropriate responses." Nearby, Mia joined the conversation. "The video I took has over 30 million views now. I've received thousands of messages from people sharing similar experiences, being questioned, excluded, or harassed while traveling. Your protocol is addressing a problem much bigger than one incident." Amara nodded thoughtfully. "That's why this matters. What happened to me was unpleasant but ultimately inconsequential. I had resources, authority, and an entire company behind me. Many people facing similar treatment have none of those advantages." Later that evening, in her Manhattan apartment overlooking Central Park, Amara reviewed the day's media coverage with Zoe. The Jackson Protocol had received overwhelmingly positive attention, with industry analysts praising its practical approach to a persistent problem. The financial impact reports are in, Zoe noted, scrolling through her tablet. Preliminary data shows that airlines implementing the protocol are seeing a 22% reduction in formal complaints and a 15% increase in customer satisfaction scores. "And Westridge Capital?" Amara asked. "Still struggling," Zoe replied. "They've lost approximately $1.8 billion in assets under management since the incident. Thomas Bennett has been interviewing with smaller firms, but his association with the viral video has made finding equivalent employment difficult." Amara nodded, taking no satisfaction in this information, but recognizing it as the natural consequence of actions and choices. And Victoria Bennett, maintaining a low profile, Their Greenwich house is on the market listed well below their purchase price. Social media monitoring shows she's been essentially excluded from her former social circles. Amara closed her laptop and walked to the window. The city lights spread out before her, each one representing lives and stories as complex as her own. The airport confrontation that had briefly placed her at the center of a viral storm had evolved into something more meaningful, a catalyst for changes that might benefit countless travelers who would never know her name. Schedule a review of the protocol implementation for 6 months from now, Amara instructed. I want comprehensive data on its effectiveness before we consider expanding to other industries. Already on the calendar, Zoe confirmed. The hotel and retail sectors have expressed interest in adapting the framework for their customer service environments. Amara smiled slightly. It's interesting, isn't it? Victoria Bennett tried to put me in my place because she couldn't see past her own assumptions. Now her actions have created a tool that helps others avoid making the same mistake. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, how a moment of discrimination had sparked a movement toward greater equality, how an attempt to diminish had instead amplified, how the woman who had demanded respect based on appearance now found herself defined by the content of her character. Sometimes, Amara said quietly, the most powerful response to disrespect isn't confrontation. It's creation. The apartment in Stamford was approximately 1/5 the size of their former Greenwich mansion. Located in a moderately priced complex that primarily housed young professionals and small families, it represented the dramatic downshift in the Bennett's circumstances. Victoria stood at the kitchen counter, no longer granite, but a practical laminate sorting through mail with an expression that still hadn't fully adjusted to their new reality. 6 months had passed since the airport incident, but its consequences continued to reshape their lives in ways she couldn't have imagined. The door opened and Thomas entered carrying grocery bags, a task he'd never performed in their previous life. His appearance had changed subtly but significantly. The designer suits replaced by department store business casual. The executive haircut grown slightly longer to extend the time between salon visits. Any calls he asked setting the bags on the counter. Victoria shook her head. Just this. She held up an envelope bearing the logo of their former country club. The membership committee has officially denied our request for reinstatement. Thomas sighed as he unpacked the groceries. We can't afford it anyway. Did you follow up with that gallery about the assistant position? Victoria nodded reluctantly. They want someone with actual work experience, not just a half-finished art history degree from 30 years ago. She paused. I've applied for a position at the Stamford Art Center. It's just administrative work, but they said my committee experience might be relevant. It was a telling measure of how much had changed that Thomas looked genuinely pleased at this news. That's great, Victoria. When will you hear back next week, supposedly? She sorted through the remaining mail. There's another letter from the Greenwich realtor. The house still hasn't sold. The Greenwich mansion, once their pride and symbol of success, had been on the market for 5 months with no serious offers. The combination of an overextended mortgage and the property's association with #AirportKaren had made it toxic to potential buyers. Each month it remained unsold added to their financial strain. Thomas opened the refrigerator, a standard model rather than the Sub-Zero they'd once considered essential, and began putting away groceries. I had my second interview with Meridian Trust today. How did it go? Victoria asked, making an effort to show interest. These small adjustments toward being a supportive partner, rather than a status-conscious socialite, were part of her ongoing struggle to adapt. Better than expected, Thomas replied. The salary would be about 40% of what I made at Westridge, but it's something. And they seemed less concerned about the incident than other firms have been. They had developed this habit of referring to the airport confrontation as the incident, as if not naming it directly might somehow diminish its impact on their lives. but its presence lingered everywhere in their reduced circumstances, in the friends who no longer called in the way people sometimes did, a double take when recognizing Victoria in public. Victoria moved to the apartment's small living room window, which overlooked a parking lot rather than the manicured gardens of Greenwich. "I saw her again," she said quietly. Thomas didn't need to ask who her referred to. On TV, Victoria nodded. A segment about that program, she created the Jackson Protocol. They were interviewing airline executives about how successful it's been. She turned back to face Thomas. "She's actually made things better because of what happened. Meanwhile, she gestured vaguely at their surroundings. "We're starting over," Thomas finished for her. "And maybe that's not entirely bad, Victoria. We were living beyond our means, surrounded by people who dropped us the moment we became a liability instead of an asset." Victoria picked up her laptop, no longer the latest Apple model, but a practical mid-range alternative, and opened it to display a news article she'd been reading. The headline read, "Horizon CEO Amara Jackson, named Business Person of the Year, credits adversity with inspiring new direction." "She never even sued us." Victoria said, a note of wonder in her voice. "She could have destroyed us completely, but she just moved on, created something instead." Thomas sat down on their modest couch, suddenly looking every one of his 55 years. "I did some research on her, you know. Did you know she grew up in Detroit? Father worked in an auto plant. Mother was a hospital administrator. Full scholarship to Stanford. Built her company from a single patent she developed while still in college." Victoria closed the laptop, unable to bear the contrast between Amara's achievements and her own life's empty pursuits. "Why didn't I see it, Thomas? How could I have been so blind? Because you never had to see it," Thomas replied simply. "Your entire life was constructed around appearance rather than substance. We both built our identities on showing rather than being." The conversation was interrupted by Victoria's phone ringing, a rare occurrence these days. She checked the screen and answered hesitantly. "Hello? Yes, this is Victoria Bennett, the Stanford Art Center. Yes, I applied. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I can be there. Thank you for the opportunity." She ended the call and looked at Thomas with a mixture of nervousness and tentative hope. "They want me to come in for an interview. It's only part-time minimum wage, plus a small commission on sales, but it's something real." Thomas finished for her. "Something you built yourself, rather than acquired through association." Victoria nodded, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. "I think I need to prepare. I've never actually interviewed for a job before." As she moved toward the bedroom to select an outfit no longer from a closet full of designer labels, but from a modest wardrobe of practical clothes, Victoria caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman who stared back was still recognizably her, but changed in subtle ways that went beyond the absence of professional hair coloring and luxury skincare treatments. There was a humility in her eyes that had never been there before, a recognition that the world was larger and more complex than her narrow slice of Greenwich society had led her to believe. In their diminished circumstances, with their social standing destroyed and their financial security shattered, the Bennetts were facing something neither had anticipated: the opportunity to discover who they actually were, beneath the trappings of wealth and status they had mistaken for identity. 1 year to the day after the airport incident, Amara Jackson stood on the stage of Lincoln Center accepting the Global Leadership Award for Innovation and Social Impact. The black-tie audience represented the elite of business technology and philanthropy, a far cry from the chaotic terminal where Victoria Bennett had once questioned her right to occupy space. "Thank you for this recognition," Amara began, her voice calm and measured as always. "Though I must acknowledge that the path that led here began with an uncomfortable moment that many of you have seen online." A knowing murmur rippled through the audience. The video had become a case study in business schools and diversity training programs worldwide. "That day taught me something important," Amara continued. When we face disrespect or discrimination, we have two possible responses. We can focus on punishing the offense, or we can channel that energy into creating better structures for the future. The Jackson protocol chose the latter path. The screen behind her displayed statistics from the protocol's first year of implementation, a 34% reduction in reported bias incidents across participating airlines, a 28% increase in positive feedback from passengers of color and adoption by 22 major carriers worldwide. But numbers tell only part of the story, Amara acknowledged. The real impact is measured in human dignity in the passenger, who no longer has to prove they belong in first class, in the flight attendant, who has clear guidelines for respectful interaction in the traveling public, who increasingly experience aviation as a space of equality rather than hierarchy. From her seat in the front row, Zoe Williams watched with quiet pride. Beside her sat Diego Rodriguez, now Director of Equity Training for his airline, and Mia Hernandez, who had recently joined Horizon's communication team after her thoughtful handling of the viral video caught Amara's attention. The most powerful response to prejudice isn't revenge. Amara continued her words, resonating through the hall. It's reimagination, creating systems so good that the old biased ones become obsolete. It's transformation, rather than retaliation. As Amara concluded her remarks to enthusiastic applause, a side door opened, admitting a late-arriving server carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The server moved efficiently around the perimeter of the room, head slightly bowed in the universal posture of someone trying to be unobtrusive. As she reached Amara's table during the reception that followed, the server finally looked up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. The server was Victoria Bennett. The recognition was instantaneous and mutual. Victoria froze the tray, trembling slightly in her hands. Amara's expression remained neutral, revealing nothing of her thoughts at this unexpected encounter. For 3 heartbeats, they simply looked at each other. The woman whose casual prejudice had launched a viral moment, and the woman who had transformed that moment into meaningful change. Then Amara gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before turning her attention back to her conversation partners. Victoria continued her circuit of the room, her movements now slightly mechanical as she processed the enormity of the coincidence. The job at the Stamford Arts Center had lasted only 2 months before budget cuts eliminated the position. After that came a series of temporary roles: receptionist, retail associate, and finally, event server for a catering company that handled high-profile Manhattan functions. The universe, it seemed, had a poetic sense of justice. Later that evening, as guests began to depart, Amara found herself momentarily alone near the coat check. Victoria approached, no longer carrying a tray, but clearly still on duty. "Ms. Jackson," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect you to speak with me, but I need to say something." Amara regarded her silently, neither encouraging nor discouraging the interaction. "I'm sorry," Victoria continued, the words clearly difficult for her. "What I did that day was inexcusable. I've spent a year living with the consequences, and I still don't understand how I could have been so blind." Amara studied Victoria's face, the absence of expensive treatments now revealing her true age, the designer clothes replaced by a standard black uniform, the entitlement erased by humility born of necessity. Mrs. Bennett Amara finally replied, her voice neither warm nor cold, but simply direct. "Thank you for your apology. I hope this past year has been educational for you." Victoria nodded, eyes downcast. "More than you can imagine. We lost everything: our home, our social standing, my husband's career." She paused. "But in losing all that, I finally had to look at who I actually am without those things. It hasn't been a comfortable revelation." "Growth rarely is," Amara observed. A catering supervisor appeared at the end of the hallway, gesturing urgently for Victoria to return to work. She nodded acknowledgement before turning back to Amara. "The protocol you created, it's changing things," Victoria said. "My daughter sent me an article about it. She hasn't spoken to me since the video went viral, but she sent me that. I think it was her way of saying that something good came from my mistake." Something good comes from most mistakes if we're willing to learn from them, Amara replied. She reached into her clutch and extracted a business card, offering it to Victoria. The Horizon Foundation is launching a mentorship program for people rebuilding their lives after significant setbacks. If you're interested, send an email to this address. Victoria accepted the card with visible surprise. Why would you help me after what I did? Amara gathered her coat from the attendant before answering. Because the measure of power isn't what you can take from others, Mrs. Bennett. It's what you can give when you have every reason not to. With that, she departed, leaving Victoria standing in the hallway, the simple white business card representing something she had never expected to receive again, an opportunity based on who she might become rather than who she had been. Outside Lincoln Center, Amara's driver held the door of her car. As she settled into the back seat, Zoe joined her, already reviewing the schedule for tomorrow. The Jackson Protocol implementation meeting is at 9 a.m., Zoe reminded her. The European aviation authorities want to discuss potential regulatory adoption. Amara nodded, her thoughts still on the unexpected encounter with Victoria. Add something to my calendar for next week. I want to review the application criteria for the mentorship program. I think we need to ensure it's truly accessible to those who need it most. Of course, Zoe replied, making the note. Anything else? Amara gazed out at the New York skyline, the city lights reflecting in the car window. Yes. Send a message to the team. Tell them the next phase of the protocol should focus on service industry environments. I think we've found our next frontier for improvement. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying Amara toward her next creation. Another system designed to replace judgment with opportunity to transform spaces where people like Victoria Bennett once wielded casual cruelty into environments where dignity was the default setting. In the year since a seat was snatched and a laptop thrown, both women had been changed by the encounter, one elevated by her response to injustice, the other humbled by its consequences. But in that brief hallway exchange, something unexpected had occurred, the first fragile tendril of redemption offered not because it was deserved, but because extending it demonstrated the very power that Victoria had once failed to recognize. What would you do if someone publicly humiliated you, then lost everything because of it? Would you help them rebuild or let the consequences play out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This story isn't just about an entitled woman getting her comeuppance or a powerful CEO proving her worth. It's about the choice we all face when confronted with disrespect. Do we respond with revenge, or do we create something better? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice, dignity, and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that true power often comes in unexpected packages, sometimes even wearing a hoodie in an airport terminal. Before you go, I'd love to know if you've ever been misjudged based on your appearance and how you handled it. Leave a comment sharing your experience. And if you want to see more stories that reveal what real power looks like in today's world, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Remember, in a world where anyone can tear others down, the truly powerful choose to build something instead. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.